WWE and AEW both had pay-per-views last week, and I have only watched the first couple matches of Payback, so I can't comment on too much, but Dave watched it, had a couple notes, so we'll talk about that quickly before going into the main event this week.
Becky Lynch beating Trish Stratus in the cage match. Probably one of the better matches. Trish had a hematoma on her head at one point. That looks like this is going to be Trish's last match with the company for a while. So hats on her for, taking all these bumps and trying to elevate people like Zoe Stark. I think she did a good job. LA Knight versus Miz. I believe that's what you had seen up to. This was kind of a real average match for me, but I think what it showed was just how over LA Knight is right now. That, it didn't matter like if it was the highest match, like they're behind everything LA Knight is doing.
The worst part of it is I caught all of the talking segment before our pre-show talk with you, me, and Kyle. And that's when the match started. So I will be coming back to that later.
Rey Mysterio beat Theory. Seth Rollins, I'm doing this one next, but Seth Rollins beat Nakamura. They're continuing to play up the back, though. Seth's back was hurt in this. Something WWE and AEW are both doing well is keeping injuries sold in some of these angles. MJF continues to sell the neck. Rollins continues to sell the back, which would play out on Raw, and they're building that. But the other matches I wanted to save here were the Judgment Day. Because the Judgment Day, Damian Priest and Finn Balor, who had dissension teased for this match with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who I know have been beat up a little bit, especially Owens. And, oh, my God. Owens was on a mission to be like Terry Funk in here. He was diving off of balconies. Just absolutely chaos. Rhea Ripley spears Owens at one point through a barrier. The ring barrier. It was all over the crowd, tables, you name it. But in the end, JD McDonough plays a part, interferes. He gets taken out. Dominic Mysterio finally comes back, and the Judgment Day pull it off, and they're celebrating with all the titles. And Rhea Ripley would go on to beat Raquel Rodriguez as well. So there again, you have this image now of this faction. They have the tag titles, both sets of the tag titles. They have the Money in the Bank contract with Priest. You have the North American title with Dom on NXT. And you have Ripley, who's the women's champion. The visual is great. And what they've done is now they've elevated this faction to almost bloodline level.
Yeah, we did the mid-year awards a little too early because the bloodline had it at that point for the storyline that they had going in. But we even discussed it in the mid-year awards that going into the end of the year, it could be Judgment Day's time, mainly because they are still a faction and they've been built up huge. They just elevated their status so much more on this pay-per-view that I don't want to say horseman status, but they're like dangerous alliance status. They're going to be that faction that has a name. Do it for another year and a half. Then maybe you could start talking about them with some of those other higher ranked factions.
Absolutely. And if Priest does end up with the world title out of this and they're somehow all still together, now we got even a bigger faction. I'll throw this out here though. I heard a fan theory somewhere that wouldn't have been something. I don't know if you saw this. JD McDonough came out because he's trying to win over the Judgment Day. And in particular, Priest, and he said, "You don't need that briefcase. I got a briefcase." So he gave him this custom briefcase that was like purple and said Judgment Day. And Priest was like, "Oh, wow, that's great." Which I thought was kind of goofy, like a briefcase. Looks like a toy briefcase. But the theory I heard was interesting was, would it have been something if there was no contract actually in that briefcase? He goes to cash in, there's no contract. And then Finn, who they've played up, JD, have been friends for 20-something years, actually pulls out the contract and cashes it in.
That would be interesting. God, we haven't had the no contract in a briefcase since maybe the 80s, 90s?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Money in the Bank, they've never done that. So you could argue it could cheapen it, but it would also be compelling in the fact that it's never been done.
Yeah, I don't know if it cheapens it. I mean, it's already a gimmick, so you're just further gimmicking it, but it gives it a different storyline. So I like that.